So if you have a role in building infrastructure to help provide services, today I have a really exciting interview with Dahlia. She's responsible for a number of companies that have been working hard in Egypt to build these really systemic services for people that receive behavior analytics services. And I think there's some lessons to learn regardless of where you are, but it's also very useful to take the perspective of somebody else and see what's going on with today's global and interconnected world, including in behavior analysis. Sometimes it's just nice to see what other people are doing and realize that your perspective that you may put out there may be totally different, and it might be totally different problems that are being dealt with on the other side of the world. So in 2018, Dr. Megan Miller invited me to join along and sponsored a trip where I could capture and share this information with you all on what's going on. Now, Dahlia was the main contact that we had there, responsible for Launch Egypt as well as the Egyptian Autistic Society. And when we sat down, it was very interesting because one of the first things that she says, as you'll see, is that she had no idea or no clue what was going to be going on. A lot of the progress and what happened wasn't intentional per se. She was doing what a lot of us do, and that is just trying to figure out how do we provide services and help the people that we see that could benefit from behavior analytics services. And she has a very unique model to funding services that I think you might be interested in, especially all of you that are struggling and fighting the government systems right now. She's got a totally different approach.
I think it was March last year, so that would be March 2017.
Okay, so you're like a year in.
Yeah.
All right, how has it been so far?
I think it's doing well. It's doing really well, thank God. It's been different for me because Launch is a private business and I'm used to NGOs, and I haven't had partners before, so I'm used to just like doing really bad business decisions and it works. But no, in general, it's nice to have the funding, to have the resources. It's nice to be able to buy a lot of programs and use them and do staff training the way I've always wanted to do. Like there's stuff I've always wanted to do, but we've had limited resources. Yeah. So this is nice that we're getting to train staff properly. They're getting they have the tools, the resources. So that this part of it's very nice. Yes.
So you've done a ton of advocacy work to help kind of set this up as well, right?
Yes.
My understanding is you've like forged that with a lot of help, but like you've like led that, right?
The advocacy for
Here
autism.
Yeah. So when did you start EAS? Is what it is, right?
1999.
Okay.
Yes.
Did that play a big role? I would assume it did in being able to eventually start
Definitely,
Launch.
because when you speak as an NGO to any government official, it's different than when you speak as a person. Okay, especially if you're not a parent, if you're a professional. So EAS, I founded it and set it up in 1999. We've been working very hard since. Most of the awareness is done through EAS. And definitely, if it wasn't through EAS, I wouldn't have started Launch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's EAS's mission, just real quick?
The Egyptian Autistic Society. Well, our missions changes according to the needs of the children, honestly. Okay. So when we first started, it just started off as giving sessions to the children. That's all it was, just sessions to children who needed sessions.
Okay.
And then we were diagnosing because children needed diagnosing. And then we were doing family counseling because they needed counseling.
Okay.
And then we were like pushing to get them into nurseries because the children needed to be mainstreamed. And then we were pushing to get them into school. So all this pushing meant we had to start advocating and doing like more political things. Yeah. And so as the kids got older, we changed their needs, based on their needs. So if we were pushing first for schools, then universities, now for jobs. And so our scope just gets wider and wider based on our clientele and their needs.
How have you built that up? So you can only do so much, right? So is there just a lot of people involved?
You know what I think? I think because none of it was intentional. I have to tell you. I mean, we spoke about how EAS was set up, and EAS was basically set up because I was working in a school and I left the school, and then some of the cases followed me, so I was doing private sessions in my house. They kept telling each other, so more and more cases were coming in. So my granddad gave me his basement, which is like a room on the garden, so that turned into a classroom. But there was more and more and more kids coming in. and some centers were like getting upset that I'm stealing their kids when I wasn't. I was just like having
Right.
fun with the kids basically.
Yeah.
And so I had to get a legal framework for that shed, the
Yeah.
garden shed.
Yeah.
And I asked, you know, so what's the easiest license I can get? And at the time they said, well, if it's something for disabilities, it has to be under the Ministry of Social Affairs. So I just handed in all my my degrees and everything and got the license at
Yeah.
the Autistic Society. And I remember it was quite funny because like I was mesmerized by the National Autistic Society in the UK, and so I wanted the name to be very similar. You know, it had to be. It had to include Egypt, and I had to include autism, so that if I'm corresponding with anyone abroad, they know exactly where I wanted it quite scientific.
Yeah.
And they kept refusing, and they'd send me the papers back saying, no, we're not going to give you that name. You need something more cheerful, like the Red Rose. And I'm like, it's not a cabaret. It's a... So I kept... That was probably like one of my first fights. No, I want that name. And then we finally got the name.
So, okay, rewind a little bit. You've been... It sounded like all over the world, at different parts of your life, yes?
Yes, my father was a diplomat.
Okay.
So I started off in Czechoslovakia at the time.
Okay.
Okay, so it's Prague. And then we moved to Liberia, West Africa.
Okay.
And then to London. I lived in London for 4 years. And then to Australia.
Okay.
And then to Egypt. And then I got married and moved back to Australia for a bit.
Okay.
I did my master's in England in between. So
Okay.
yeah. And then finally moved back here in 1994.
It sounds like a lot of travel to the States as well. And
Yes,
other
in
places
between for courses and stuff, yes.
What's your experience been like? Is everyone doing very different things there with behavior analysis or autism? Is it, are you kind of like picking up all these different things from all over the place? Or
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm very much influenced by what happens in the UK, just because I studied in Birmingham and because I got to know what happens with the local education authority. So I know how the system works there.
Okay.
But like wherever I travel, and I like the system, and this is what we apply. We don't follow one system, as you've seen. Like, we have an eclectic system. We take the best of Teach, the best of ABA. Some of we just do whatever works with that child.
Yeah. What's different here than from abroad at these other places?
Well, number one is, I would say, funding.
Okay.
Because and this I saw very much when with EAS, because it is a non-profit organization. So I think in the States and in the UK and other places, the government is mainly funds the therapy of these children.
Yeah.
Here, that's not how it works.
At all, right?
No.
Yeah.
There are some government organizations that run classes, but they're very poorly led. The teachers are not qualified at all. The children are unfortunately mistreated. And they're not funded, again. So funding is a huge issue, because unless you can privately afford it, or unless you're being sponsored. So EAS works on donations and sponsorships. So I'll go to companies and say, the child costs me X, how many children do you want to sponsor? And then they'll cover the fees.
Okay.
So that funding is definitely number one.
Okay.
Number two, or awareness, even before funding, because before awareness, when we went to the companies and told them, we're not going to help you, we don't know what you're talking about. So awareness before.
And that's like always, right?
Awareness was always, but like we've seen the difference, you know, like the first year with the awareness campaign, people are just like, shoot, go away. Who are you? We've got so many more things to look after. Now, because it's getting so much attention in the media, we actually have people coming saying, I'm going to be your sole sponsor. I'm going to pay for this. I'm going to light up the pyramids for you. I'm going to do this. I'm like, oh, where were you 7 years ago? And I was like begging for £5,000, you know?
Yeah.
But now it's like become fashionable, you know, to like everyone's turning things blue, which is nice. I mean, I love it. I'm happy, but it's just like, where were you when we needed all this? So
what are some of the limitations, I guess? Is there anything else that's specific?
So as I said, so awareness, funding, training.
Okay.
We have a huge problem in the training, because we don't, we don't have a degree that qualifies anybody to work with autism. So. All the staff I have are either psychology graduates or special ed graduates, but they're not trained on autism specifically. Even the medical profession, like even the medical schools, they would have like one paragraph on autism, and that's it. So, I mean, to try and compensate that so I can get my staff, not for any other reason. I made deals like with the American University in Cairo and Helwan University, where I take their 4th year psychology and special ed students to do 1 year of practical work at EAS. And now at launch as well.
Hey, you're good. You're good. Where's launch heading the next like year or two? Like, what are you working on developing?
I think the idea with launch was it's the same as everywhere else. There's a lot of therapies, okay, but there's also a lot of commuting for the parents, and it's very exhausting. Okay. And there's a lot of people who claim to know what they're doing, but they actually don't.
Okay.
So launch was, I mean, the theory behind it, or the mission of it, was to collect all the therapies in one place. Okay. So that the child can get his speech in the same place from somebody who's qualified to give him a good speech program, his occupational therapy, his behavioral program, his social skills, all to be in one place, instead of the mother commuting from here to there and wasting her time and his time and exhausted all the time. And with quality therapy, and at the same time, so Egyptian Autistic Society was poorly funded and catering to a certain segment of society. The remaining segment were traveling to the States every summer, spending thousands and thousands of dollars for 2 months, and then coming back and not being able to apply what they learned for the rest of the months. Yeah. You know. So we said, well, why don't we provide this here throughout the year? Who are the therapists you travel to these 2 months, and we'll have them come here and train our therapists and do the training for us. And so it's like bringing abroad closer, basically.
So for analysts in the US, which is where about 85-90% of you view from, I think this perspective is very important. And for one reason I really wanted to drive home, and that is, we talk and connect so much on social media, and we talk about our own problems, but I think it'd be really beneficial for us to step back and put that in context of other people's problems, especially when those other folks can see yours. Something I experienced here was the year's salary of what somebody makes providing services over there. An entire year is the equivalent to this mediocre lens. This lens, like this one thing that I was holding in my hand when I was capturing stuff, is equivalent to a year's worth of work for somebody. And so when we talk about our problems, just framing those in the context of there's a lot of people looking at those, I think is a very important message to take away here. As I mentioned, this video was sponsored by Megan Miller. Thank you so much for your support. If you can do me one thing down below, if any of this resonated with you, please thank Megan Miller. She's the one that made all of this possible. Now, this whole trip is coming together on what is a working title of the Dissemination Project, because there's a lot of stuff that is labeled as dissemination but might just be a social media post or someone on a cool vacation, or it might be someone actually trying to really build a systemic solution and help people scale behavior analytic services in an ethical manner. So what we're working on doing is bringing this all together in one dissemination video to talk about that whole issue. If you care to support this or in a position to where you can, patreon.com/thedailyba is how you can help out. It's a values-based model. Thanks for your time. I'll see you tomorrow with another interview from the Egypt Project. That's your Daily B.